what happened that went wrong as you were being brought up, or what happened that went right. I want to be close to your siblings. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I love my sister. So I want to be close to my sibling. And like any other relationship, it takes work in order to keep those relationships close, or naturally you're just going to grow apart.
Right.
Welcome to the NOIRPOISED podcast, where wisdom is power is more than just a motto.
It's our way of life.
Welcome back to the NOIRPOISED podcast. Not too long ago, we had a conversation with some loved ones about sibling dynamics. And as a parent now, I think about it more often than I used to. Like, it was something I always thought about because I noticed like my relationship with my sibling versus like my cousin's relationship with theirs, or some of my friends with theirs. And you just hear people say certain things and it just makes you wonder like what happened that went wrong as you were being brought up, or what happened that went right. You know what I mean? Like, what keeps siblings tight knit versus those that have like sibling rivalry, or just are like one of those siblings that's just like, yeah, I know you good, so, you know, we don't need to be like
Too close.
tight. Yeah, exactly. A lot of people around our age tends to either go through, wonder if they're having those issues, if that makes sense, because you want to be close to your siblings. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I love my sister, so I want to be close to my sibling. And like any other relationship, it takes work in order to keep those relationships close, or naturally you're just going to grow apart because that's what happens. You're not 15, 16 anymore. So if you're not putting in the work that was naturally happening when you were living in close quarters in the same home, you're naturally going to end up moving further away from one another.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on sibling dynamics? Like, as a father now, if you were a father of multiples, like what would come to mind first that you think would help create that bond, but not just create it, but keep it?
The first thing that comes to mind is definitely fairness, which brings me to a point I wanted to make. We kind of spoke about this before, but I didn't know there was a term to it. But have you ever heard of the birth order theory?
Yeah.
So basically, for those who have never heard of it, it's by this psychotherapist that was born like in the 1870s, and he worked until like the 1930s. Essentially, what he said was the order you're born kind of dictates your personality.
Yeah.
And first child tend to have a higher IQ. They tend to be more of a perfectionist. You know, they tend to follow law and order. The middle child tends to be more of the peacekeeper, looking for fairness. That's why I thought it was interesting, where my answer naturally would have been I would look for fairness. And a third child is more so creative. They don't follow the rules as much because they don't receive as much attention.
They're more of the rebels.
Right. And I think all that kind of plays a role in how parents bring up a child and how a child perceives life. So me being the middle child, I kind of always felt like things weren't fair. Where sometimes I was forced to do things that I witnessed my younger sibling not have to do, or my older sibling not have to do. So I actually had this conversation with my parents before, where I told them, like, when I have kids, I'm not going to be that way. And my parents' response was, let me know when you have kids. And you'll see. Sometimes you just see that one kid might naturally be a better listener, or they might do one thing better than the other sibling, and vice versa. So their mindset was, whoever could do this the best, that's what I'm going to focus on. If I have an older brother, if my older brother was able to do ABC better, then my younger sibling and I would not have to do it. If my sister did something better, same thing. If I did something better, same thing. And like growing up, I always felt like that was unfair, because now you have responsibility placed on one person. And I think it just naturally kind of messes you up when you're growing up, to be quite honest with you. And thankfully, this hasn't happened between my siblings and I, but I could definitely understand why there would be some resentment amongst family members.
Yeah, I get that. And I've heard of that, the whole like dynamic, like based on when you're born or what position you're born in. And I think there is truth to it, but you know, my answers are never like direct. Yeah. So I don't think it's a one size fits all where like that's always the case, but I do think there are certain characteristics because of the position you're born in. Because reality is, firstborns, your parents hasn't had a kid yet. They don't know what the heck they're doing. we're like the guinea pig. So they're testing things
trial
out.
kid.
Yeah, we're the trial kid. So as the trial kid, they're going to make more mistakes with us. You know what I mean? They're going to give more attention to us sometimes. Like it depends on the parents, of course, because sometimes the firstborn doesn't get as much attention and it's the other way around. But the point I'm trying to make is there's always going to be a difference regardless of what position or, you know, where you fall. And I actually heard this from this doctor that's like on social media, Dr. Gaber Mate. I don't know if you guys ever heard it. I'll post this clip when this episode airs. But he basically was saying how regardless of if your parents were to do everything the exact same way with every child, the reality is they're not the same person they were when they had your brother versus you versus your sister.
Right.
You get what I mean? I'm one of two and I'm the oldest. I've witnessed it. There's only a 3-year gap between me and my sister, but I have specific memories on when I was in a certain situation versus when my sister was in a certain situation that was similar and how my mom handled it. But I also witnessed the growth of my mom and I witnessed how she changed as we got older. So by the time my sister was like 17, whatever I wasn't allowed to do at 17, my mom was more lenient. And that's usually the case. That's why the youngest child is usually like a little bit more rebellious or they're more likely to be more out there and bold is because they don't have the same strictness that occurs with the first child.
Right.
And the first child, you have to remember, they don't have anyone else to look at except their parents.
Right.
So you're looking at nothing but adults. Can you imagine being like 5 years old and you're just surrounded by just adults? Yeah. What are you going to mimic? You're going to mimic the adults. And they say this about firstborns, that firstborns tend to like idolize the parents more than the others. And then the secondborn doesn't because they have not just the parents to look at now, but now they're looking at like, oh, where did my older sibling mess up? Now I know not to do that. Oh, you got in trouble for that? Now I know when I get there, I know what to do. You have more options.
Right.
That's basically what it boils down to.
According to the birth order, the oldest sibling tends to be viewed as the parental figure to the younger siblings.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that. I think I've seen that personally with my sister, and I've seen that with your sister as well, where they kind of come to us in more of a, I'm gonna come to you before I go to my parents type thing. But what you're saying reminds me of a conversation I had with a coworker. This was years ago. She had her first kid when she was like young, like I think teenager, like 17, 18, whatever the case is. And she was just telling me about how bad her oldest one is now. Her oldest one's like in her 20s now. She casually mentions like, you know, we had it when we were young. We weren't perfect. We didn't know what we were doing.
That's usually the case.
Yeah. And then she went on to brag about her other kids.
One.
Yeah. And I didn't stop because I wasn't trying to pry or anything. Yeah. But I never forgot that because it's kind of like what you're saying where people change. So the first child is kind of like the trial.
We're guinea pigs.
Yeah. So
that's literally what I call, we're literally guinea pigs.
I hear you say that all the time. Like, you know, your mom didn't practice with anyone. Your parents didn't practice with anyone. It's kind of like you had to witness your parent change. And then you had to witness some of the things that you got in trouble for. Your younger sibling didn't get in trouble for. And you
or celebrated for the same things you got in trouble for. You're just like, wait a minute.
Right. And I think all that kind of plays a role in how siblings interact with each other.
Yeah, it does. And that's why for me now as a parent, because I've always thought of it because of the way I witnessed things growing up. And of course, this is my perspective. Like I'm always going to see it from my perspective. We may talk to our siblings and they have a whole different perspective. But that's what's good about the fact that I'm an oldest and you're a middle is because we get to understand different sides of it. You're one of three and I'm one of two. So that's already a different dynamic. Yeah. Because like sometimes like I'll think of things that you say about your experience and being the second born. And I've actually noticed there's a difference when it's the second born of three or more versus the second born of just two.
How so?
The second born in my case is the youngest child.
Yeah.
You're not the youngest child. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah. Like you and your sister are what, 2 years apart?
Yeah.
So you just, the way I look at it is because I hear friends and family members sometimes complain about like their older sibling or something like that, or the younger sibling. I'm just like, you kind of have to put yourself in the shoes of that person when they were a child. So like, for example, if I had parents arguing, let's just say I had parents arguing in front of us, right? I'm 6 years old. my sister's 3. At 6 years old, I'm going to have a whole different understanding and perception of what's occurring versus what my sister is experiencing.
Right.
We're both experiencing the same exact thing, but we're dissecting it different because 1, we have different personalities and characteristics, right? So we have different sensitivities. 2, we're different ages, so it's going to affect us different. Something that happens to a kid at 2 versus 5 is not going to affect them the same exact way. So you sometimes have to think of that, and that's what I tell you with like you and your siblings. Yeah, you guys are not like OD large in age gap, but you have to understand that like when you're a kid, 1 year, 1 to 2 year is a big difference. When you have, like me and my friend, we have children that are 6 months apart, and we saw differences with just the 6 months. When they're older, they're 15, it'll be 15, it'll be the same.
Yeah.
But when you're children, it's a huge difference. 1 year makes a huge difference. We look at videos of our daughter now from last year, and we're just like, yo, that's crazy. So you have to always think of things like that. Like, and that's why I agree with the whole concept of fairness. And I think that would be my approach. I understand why parents will notice the strengths and be like, all right, you're responsible, you do it well. I don't have to beg you to do it, so I'm going to keep making you do it. But what they don't realize, and this is what I told my mom, I was like, at some point, you're going to regret those decisions. Because what's going to happen is you're not teaching every child the same skills. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you're not teaching, it doesn't matter what your weakness or strength, well, it matters. But it matters in the sense of like, if I notice your strength is, you're very organized, right? And I notice your sibling is not as organized as you. That's okay because you're 2 different people. But as the parent, it's not my job to make you do everything that involves organization and make your sibling not. Because what's going to happen is they're going to keep on that trajectory and never gain any type of organizational skills. As the parent, and I think that's where our flaw is a lot as people, is we go for what's easy versus what we should be doing. It's a challenge, but it's our job as parents to guide them. So if you're not guiding, what's going to happen? And then when they're in their 20s, you can't complain that they never make their bed, they never this, they never that. You never molded them to do that. So as the parent, while I notice you're organized and I don't have to work as hard, then now I need to start making the one who's actually not organized should be doing it more than you, because that's your strength. It's the other one's weakness. My goal as the parent is to work on your weakness, to bring it somewhere where like you can do it. You don't have to perfect it. I'm not gonna, like criticize you and stuff like that. But it's my job to work on it so that way now you understand how to be organized. It may not ever be the same way that the organized sibling is, but to some level, you gain some form of like skill to you improve. You get what I'm saying? So that's why, like, because I actually remember when your parents said that, and I was just like, yeah. And I have people tell me stuff like that all the time, and I get to the position I'm just like, I don't agree still. You know what I mean? Like, I don't agree. But to each his own, of course. Everyone does things different. It's not that one is wrong or right. But I do think fairness is very important. It's not fairness in the sense of, oh, if so-and-so got an 80, the other one got to get an 82. That's not the type of fairness I'm thinking of it as. It's more so like everyone are going to learn these basic skills. Just because Sam does like A plus at this specific skill doesn't mean I'm going to bash the other for not getting an A plus, but it's all about progress. So if I notice you were doing an A, your sister was getting a B, your brother was getting like a C, if you all elevate to some extent, and it doesn't have to be everyone gets to an A, but everyone elevates to some extent, there's progression. That's what's fairness to me, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
I actually want to kind of take back my answer a little bit about fairness, and I'll switch the word fairness for balance.
Love it.
The reason why I say that is,
Love it.
As you're speaking, sometimes I forget. I label myself as a middle child, but I'm still a younger sibling.
You're not though.
But
you're a rare breed. Honestly, no, like legit, he's a rare breed. Don't even call yourself a middle child, because every time I read things about middle children and their characteristics, I'm like, that is not you in any way, shape, or form. The only thing I would say is you, which I'm not going. I love you.
Here it comes.
I'm not gonna lie. When you first started telling me certain stuff, I was just like, "Oh, he's a middle child. Everything's unfair. They always forget you. You get no attention, whatever." But now that I've been with you for so many years, and I witness it myself without, even when you're not present, I'm just like, yeah, I see it. You're definitely 100% right. I don't know if you guys know middle children, but they swear they never get attention and they're the forgotten one and they do good and no one sees their goodness.
That's one of the things that Adler said as well, I think.
What?
The middle child's kind of like,
I could see how it's forgotten.
Not forgotten, but doesn't get as much of the attention. Like the youngest sibling is
trying to be nice, but the term is forgotten.
The youngest sibling doesn't get as much attention as well, but it's different because you have the oldest one.
The younger sibling doesn't get as much attention?
Well, what he was saying was the oldest sibling, you're older, so you had time to get the attention.
Yes,
you're the oldest one. The youngest one tends to be more creative and free-spirited, so you always kind of got to be watched because we don't know what you're going to do kind of thing. The middle one kind of falls in the middle where you're not the first to do it, so we know.
Yeah, so it's not a surprise.
And you're not the youngest, so we don't have to. We expect a certain maturity from you, kind of thing. As you're speaking, I'm just thinking about my life growing up, and there was a time, of course, I was a younger sibling. Like I kind of randomly.
2 years?
But let me tell you.
That's the thing. It's not in your case. I don't think it's.
But let me tell you how, right? Because I think one of the characteristics of a younger sibling, you expect the older sibling, you expect people to do things for you because I can't do it, so you gotta do it, kind of thing. And my brother was never really like that. Like, oh, you can't do it, then it's not gonna get done, kind of thing. I suck at drawing, right? So I had an art homework for the elementary school, and I told my brother, like, you gotta do this for me.
The nerve.
Like, you gotta do this for me because you're a better drawer than me. Like, you gotta do it. And I never forgot that. Before I went to bed, I begged him. I was like, please, I'm going to sleep now. Just do it. So I woke up and he didn't do it. I could tell my mom tried to do it for me because I could tell. But fast forward a few years later when I was going to college and I had to apply for financial aid and all that, I told my brother, you got to do it for me because I don't know what to do.
What?
But listen.
What do you mean you got to do it for me?
Again, that's the youngest sibling part where, listen, I can't do it, so you got to do it for me.
I'm about to call my sister after this episode and ask her if she does that.
So I never forgot because I think this was actually a pivotal moment in my life, as crazy as it sounds. My brother pulled up a chair. He said, I'm going to show you once, and after this, you're going to do it, like for yourself. I'm not going to show you again. And that was true. He helped me fill it out. He showed me what to do. And after that, if I came to me like, I need help, be like, you figure it out. I showed you what to do already. And I say all that to say, I think fairness is more so you're the older sibling. You've experienced it before. You should be able to more willingly help your younger sibling, no matter how many times they need help. But I think balance is more so, like you were saying, I notice child 1 is good at, organization. Child B is not so good at organization. Balance would be, I'm going to spend more time and attention helping child B be more organized versus I'm just not going to expect child B to be as organized as child A. And I think that's one of the things that actually kills sibling dynamics is just the comparison. Just because one is good at something doesn't mean the other is going to be naturally good at the same thing. If you're always comparing, I think that's when some resentment also gets in the way. So I would look for more balance than fairness.
I like that. I think balance is fair. But as you were talking, I'm like, I feel like there's also a difference between genders too.
Yeah.
Because I like to watch people very intensely. And I notice that when there's different genders involved, that changes everything. I don't know, something about when it's 2 boys versus 2 girls, there's a certain type of dynamic. But then when you have the mix of girls and boys, like in your case, it's 2 boys then a girl.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think it's a different dynamic because I know 3 siblings, multiple 3 siblings, where the girl is in the middle and it's not the same as yours, where there is a sense of the middle child has more responsibility, but in their case, they're the girl. So in our culture, a lot of times the women do take on more responsibility than the guys. And that's just Haitian culture when it comes to the parents and helping and stuff like that. How does that change when gender is involved? You know what I mean? How does that change when gender is involved, and how does that change when numbers involved? Because this is my opinion, but I always say no offense, 3 I don't care what nobody says. That to me is the worst number. God, please don't jinx me. Please don't try to prove a point.
Find some wood.
Don't try to prove a point. But every time I see 3 sibling dynamics, I'm like, yeah, I ain't doing that. I'm not. Absolutely not. Love y'all.
Why is that though?
There's always one left out. In my experience of watching, I can't say that's the, like I'm not one of 3, but this is just my opinion. I could be wrong. Y'all could call me out on it, if whatever. But every 3 sibling dynamic I have witnessed, one is always left out at some point or season in life. And I've witnessed it with your siblings. I've witnessed it with family members. I've witnessed it with friends. There's always one sibling that gets left out. And I don't know. I think
you think it's just the
do
odd
even
number?
Numbers, bro. Just if you gonna do 3, just go 4. Go 4. They all have a friend. Everybody got a friend. They got someone. So if 2 of them are doing something, the other one has someone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think there's always gonna be a form of I don't want to say resentment, but I think there's always like a level of like, oh, okay, you didn't include me. That's weird. It's 3 of us. Why wouldn't you include me? It's all 3 of us. Like, I think that's always gonna, at some point in time, occur within a season of 3 sibling dynamics. So I think numbers are also, listen, the world is made off of numbers. So listen, believe me if you want, but I'm just saying, there's something about the number 3.
You don't think that'll happen if there's like 4 as well?
Not as easily, no. I think realistically, it can happen with any number, right? Everything that we're saying right now, it could be the complete opposite. It really boils down to the children's personalities. I really believe that 75%, if not more, has to do with the parenting. Regardless of the children personalities, I think the parenting is what either sets them up for success or sets them up for failure. So regardless if it's 3 or more or less, whatever, I do think there's always going to be an aspect of it where like it can be the complete opposite.
Yeah. You had asked a question about what role do I think gender plays in it? And I think especially in our culture, gender is everything. And that's something that I'm still dealing with personally with raising a daughter. I seen this it was like a video study or something, or some study I read where they showed the difference between little boys and little girls, where when a little boy can't do something, he's more likely to try to figure it out.
Yeah, I think I showed you
and
that.
And a little
actually.
girl is more likely to just cry about it and seek help, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have a toddler who's always asking for help. Can you do this for me? Can you feed? Can you feed me? Can you do this? Can you do that? Yeah, I'm gonna get to that.
Oh, okay. I want to clarify.
There was one time where I was helping her something that she can do, but she asked for help, so
she just didn't want to do it.
Yeah, and you had asked me, I'm paraphrasing your question, but you said something to the extent of, when she gets older, do I want her to be independent or do I want her to have to rely on a man or something else? And that was definitely eye-opening for me because I never put those 2 together. And if we did have a boy, I'm going to be completely honest, like this...
You would be different.
Yeah, I'd be different. Because especially knowing that, well, being a guy, I know how boys think and how they do, and knowing that boys are more likely to try to figure it out naturally. So I'm going to keep encouraging you to figure it out versus the opposite. With that being said, I think unless the girl is the first child and unless she doesn't have a younger child, so in the case where it's just like 2, I think she's naturally going to be a little more spoiled. Not guaranteed, but I think our culture and just society kind of fosters that, where young ladies, so there's certain things that you're not supposed to do. Even when we think about certain things like cars, I do think gender plays a big role in not just how kids are raised, but just sibling dynamics. And that's something that I'm trying to do with our daughter, is just have that balance of, I know you're a girl and I know I want to come save the day and help you and stuff, but I got to think about the future you, so that you don't grow up and expect everyone to do something for you or help you, kind of thing. Like I want to take that example that I gave, what my brother said, and kind of use that, where I'm going to show you, but I'm not going to expect you to ask for help every time. I'm going to show you so you can learn.
I feel like, well, I don't agree with everything you just said, but I understand what you're saying. And it could be because that wasn't my experience. So for me, I'm just like, no. But I think it also depends on the parenting.
Yeah.
So in my case, there was one parent most of my life. So it was a different type of dynamic. Cause like, I think I encourage her to be more independent, way more than you do, of course.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I'm a woman versus in my case, there wasn't a father. So I had to be independent.
Yeah.
You get what I mean? So I also think it's like depending on if it's a one parent versus two parent household and which parent is parenting, which parent is the disciplinary parent. And it also depends on the characteristics of the parents. I love you again, no offense, but you do encourage people to count on you because you're always doing for others. Because I don't think it's just like our daughter situation. You do it across the board. You do it with your sister, you do it with your mom. Like I noticed the difference if your brother needs something versus your sister needs something. Your dad needs something versus your mom needs something. Like there's a huge difference. Maybe it is a generalized thing, but I think it's actually a you thing too, where you're more sensitive to females than you are to males, which is understandable. But I was actually reading like a few things online and I wanted to mention them because they actually say the oldest daughter is usually the more independent, responsible one, regardless if there's other genders involved. And I actually believe, I've seen that. I believe it, but I also think it depends on how far the gap is between the other sibling and culture. Culture is a big part. It depends on what culture you come from. In our culture, a lot of certain responsibilities are put on the female, and then there are other levels of responsibility that are put on the male too. So I think it really depends on if it's like 1 to 2 years versus like you're 5 years apart. You know, if a daughter's born first and then 5 years later it's a son, obviously it's going to be a whole different dynamic. Again, these are just random facts that I'm just going to put out here that I read that I was just like, we should mention. The root cause of sibling rivalry, because I don't want to lose focus on the topic. The topic was what causes it and how can we solve it. So the root causes are usually a lack of social skills, concerns with fairness, which you mentioned, individual temperaments, special needs, parenting styles, parents' conflict resolution skills, and culture. So some of the things that we mentioned, but I wanted to touch on parents' conflict resolution because what I noticed, and this is what we were saying when we were having the conversation, sibling dynamics, whether we notice it or not, and this is not across the board, but this is just what I've noticed with people in my surroundings, often mimic the dynamic that the parents had with their siblings.
That's interesting.
When it hit me, because me and my sister were like, you ain't taking my sister from me. If she died, I'm dying too. We just going together. That's basically how, like, we've literally had an agreement. We're raising our kids as siblings. This is what it is. But we're super close. And I had to think back at my childhood and how I was brought up. And I think I mentioned this before, but I grew up in an aunt home. So I grew up with cousins and aunts and uncles around. And even the ones that I didn't live with, like my mom and her siblings always saw each other. Even if they lived like 2 hours away, they were over pretty often. We always had family parties or gatherings where everyone was together every weekend. Every weekend we had uncles and aunts come over. At some point we lived with the other, you know what I mean? Like, so because of what I witnessed, I think subconsciously, whether I noticed it or not, I'm mimicking now. Because even now I have a small group of cousins that we operate like siblings. At least I think we do. Where, I mean, you see it. We go a couple weeks or months without seeing each other and we're just like, oh, time for a cousin night. And I find it funny that we do that because it was actually our parents who did it when we were younger. Like when I think back to when we were younger, the aunts and uncles that came every weekend was literally their parents. Cool. So it makes me wonder if sometimes we literally mimic what we see growing up. And it made me think about like some of the family members that I have and how their dynamic with their siblings is and how like your dynamic with your siblings is. Because what I've learned to understand is that every dynamic is different and that's okay. Every sibling dynamic is different. Because you remember when we first started like having these type of conversations, there were times like you would say something and I'm just like, yeah, why we not together all the time? Like it was confusing for me, to be honest with you. But it's not that the love is less or more. It's just every dynamic is different.
Right.
Like there are literally siblings who can go 6 months without seeing each other, but as long as they know the other's good, they're like, yeah, they good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That we fine. And it took me a long time to see that that's normal. Like that's a normal thing. Whereas my character and my sister's character, it's more so like, I don't know how they obsessive.
That's a good word.
And it makes me wonder if it's because it's just us two.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like with sibling dynamics, sometimes when you have multiple, it's just like, you always know you're going to have one there.
Yeah.
Whereas where it's just you two, it's just like, we always, you know, we only got each other.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So the point I was trying to make is that these are some of the root causes. So I think at the end of the day, while a lot of it has to do with the characteristics, I think most of it has to do with the parenting. We literally mimic what we see. If we notice that our parents argue to resolve issues, you can't be surprised if siblings are arguing to resolve issues. If they never raise their voice and they sweep things under the rug, you can't be surprised if siblings are not discussing situations and sweeping it under the rug. It's possible to change the dynamic depend if you both are in the same type of space. Because I said what I said earlier, but there are aspects where I think me and my sister are actually doing it completely different too. You know what I mean? Like there are situations where we rather have a conversation about stuff, whereas we don't come from that. Like, even though we've said it multiple times that my family's more vocal, it's really me and my sister that's more vocal, to be honest with you. Like, vocalizing issues is not a thing my mom taught us to do. Everything was swept under the rug, but we both decided that we hate that joint. So we're like, okay, we're going to talk about it. So we rather be upfront. So there are ways that like you can potentially, you know, do the complete opposite of what you saw. But if you're not actively trying to work on things, I just feel like naturally siblings are going to do exactly what their parents do. If they grew up and they did not see their parents around their siblings all the time, they're going to mimic that. It doesn't matter how much you love your siblings. That's what mentally you've been conditioned to think that, yeah, now I got my own family. You got your own family. Yeah, we see each other like once in a blue. We don't need to see each other all the time. But that's what you're accustomed to. Yeah. You feel me? I think it's that. And then not just the conflict resolution, but having favorites is another thing. Yeah. Like some parents actively say they have a favorite. And even when they don't say they have a favorite, they show they have a favorite. Yeah. So showing you have a favorite, I think can also cause resentment between siblings, especially if they're not discussing it.
And I don't think a lot of parents even do it on purpose. Because I think I would even switch the word favorite for what child they're more sensitive for. Because I think that's what comes off as, that's the favorite child. Like if I'm more sensitive for the middle child, for whatever reason, like I don't think they're capable enough, or maybe from past experience or something, is going to come off to the other siblings like you're showing favoritism because we asked for the same thing, but you didn't do it for us kind of thing. So I think that's another thing that parents are not always aware of, is how you treat certain sensitivities based off of the kid, because it comes off as favoritism.
I do agree with that, actually. But point is, like, it's terrible either way. Yeah. And that's one thing I'm always trying to condition myself to recognize now is, if I was to have more than one, like, how would that look like and how would I operate? Like, it's all about being aware, right? Because sometimes the parents don't know they're doing it sometimes. Some of them do, but some of them don't know they're doing it. But I actually read that parents tend to favor the one that reminds them more of themselves, which would make sense. Because can you imagine, like, having a child alone, you're just like, oh my God, it's like, I get to redo, like, you know what I mean? Like, all the things that I struggle with, I get to, like, guide you so you can be better. Like, that's what we think naturally sometimes.
Yeah, I would certainly believe that.
Yeah, but solutions, because this conversation's getting long-winded now. So I looked up some of the solutions that can help sibling rivalry, because like I mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, what your parents did, unfortunately, it's already done. We talk about this all the time, where when you're young, it's not your fault, but when you become an adult and you're aware, now it's your responsibility. Right. So if you want a relationship with your siblings, you can't sit there and be like, yeah, well, mom always let him do this, or mom always let her do that, and this, that. Like, at the end of the day, now it's kind of like in your hands. As long as you and your other siblings are in agreement to make it better, it can get better. It's like any other relationship. Right. You put in the work, you see the results. So some of the solutions I saw online, it's mad simple, but I think it was powerful because I think it goes back to the balance thing that you said, but sibling relationships work best when each member appreciates the similarities between them and they also respectfully note their differences. It's okay that if one is better than the other at a specific thing, you can celebrate that. Like celebrate the fact that that sibling is bold and you're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like show me how to be more bold like you and the other way around, and respect the differences. Because I think, at least I've heard this, where siblings sometimes don't comprehend another sibling because it's not their way of thinking, or they were born in a different generation and they're just like, they don't get why they operate the way that they do. But I think it's important to just learn who you're dealing with. Learn your siblings all over again, because they're not the same person they were when they were young. We say it all the time where we're like, yeah, we're not even the same person we were at 25. Yeah. It's the same for our siblings. So like, I can't look at my sister and expect her to operate the same way she did when she was 16, 17. She's not 16, 17 anymore. So it's my job as her sister to put in the work to learn more about her and see how she's evolving, and then allowing her to see my evolution too, and then talking about some of the things, because sometimes we sweeping things under the rug, and that's very common in Caribbean culture. But I think talking about things and recognizing like the other person's experience. There are many conversations my sister and I had as adults where we were both in the room and we had completely different perceptions. And I'll tell her like, you don't remember this, that, and the thing. She'll be like, yeah, I do, but I just never thought of that. And I'm like, yeah. And she'll realize that I realized it in that moment. So then it helps you have a little bit more grace on the other sibling too. And we even have those conversations because you're a middle, I'm a first. By the way, they say we're the most compatible.
Oh, really?
I'm just saying. That means you're not going nowhere. It said we're the most compatible. And I was like, look at this, God. You knew. Listen, we compatible. Cool. Don't let the hype fool you, y'all. We compatible.
That's actually pretty interesting. I can see why, definitely.
But what was I saying before this? I feel like ending it right here. I feel like ending it and letting you guys know that we compatible. I do. What was I going to say for real?
Oh, how different perceptions. So there's certain things you explained.
Yes. So different perceptions. Sometimes you think something about your sibling and you don't realize that they had a whole different understanding of it. That's what I was saying. Like sometimes we have certain conversations and I actually think I helped you understand your brother more. Yeah. Yeah. Because I'm a firstborn and like, you know, like there's certain things that people just don't understand. And I'm just like, yeah, you gotta remember that like when he was 5, you was 2, like you don't know what he witnessed at the end of the day. And I think that goes across the board. Sometimes you just have to have grace on your sibling, regardless of what order it is. Respect their perception. Don't tell them you didn't experience that. What are you talking about? Right. What problems do you have? Because that's what y'all do to younger siblings too. Yeah, no, like what problems do you have?
I apologize on the behalf of middle and younger siblings, because you older siblings do be going through it. Well, did go through it.
I'm done. Not all the time. Some of us really got the attention that y'all say we got. Yeah, legit. I
definitely. But
I had 3 years of being alone, so I don't know.
A trial, you know.
I'm done. Well, in that case, we're out. Yeah. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you guys on the next one.
See you guys.
Work. Thank you for spending your time with us. We hope you gained some knowledge today that'll promote poise in your life. We have new episodes uploaded every Thursday right here, same place, same time. Until next time, you can follow us on Instagram at NOIRPOISED Podcast to stay connected. That's NOIRPOISED Podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback.
And remember, your wisdom is power. Thank you.